Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session on the economic case for education. I'm going to be taking us through the next 45 minutes on this a vital topic, and I think one which is really coming back into its own after the pandemic with renewed urgency. My name's Anne McElvoy. I'm executive editor at The Economist. And also, happens to just be one of my areas of very strong personal interest. So I'm delighted to chair it. I will take us briefly through a few of the big questions that we hope to get through, and then introduce my wonderful panel sitting next to me. And of course, we're hoping for your participation too as we go along, and we will be having a Q&A shortly. The hashtag for the meeting, I think you all know this, is hashtag WEF22. Please do feel free to tweet along and, well, basically just do what you do on social, really. One thing that I noticed as I was preparing for this yesterday was that the figures around this are so stark, and I think surprising and rather worrying, even to those of us who feel that we know education well and have been trying to advocate for more to be spent on it, done about it, and for efficiencies and commitment to increase. We know that global inequalities are persistent in attainment, but we also know that they have got worse over the pandemic. We have figures, for instance, here, which I think are cited in the report you can pick up at the back, which is a projection of a 3.9% decline in lifetime incomes, a loss of up to $17 trillion globally, which is largely as a result of closures in schools from the pandemic and the after effects. On the upside, if we can get there, the evidence of ROI on investment is very clear. A $1 investment in child's education yielding up to $5 in returns over a lifetime, and that is in lower income countries. Half of that in middle income countries, but still, $2.5 as against $1 is a huge financial boost. At the same time, how can we make this progress without better private and public partnership? How can we make it when we're so short of teachers worldwide? 85 million teachers are employed globally across the world. In addition, 69 million is estimated by the Forum would be necessary to deliver on goals that would bring education up to the level that we would all like to see it. So I could go on, and I probably will sprinkle a few more figures across the morning. But first, I would really like to hear the perspective of the panel. And we're going to have translation for our first guest, which you will find obviously on your seat or probably under your bottom. Sitting next to me is Dina Boluarte. Welcome to you, Vice President and Minister of Development and Social Inclusion from Peru. And next in the middle is Dipu Moni, Minister of Education of Bangladesh, and JD Larocque, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Network for Teaching. So Dina, why don't you take us away with what you believe the key guiding points are on the economic case for education?
Sí, muchas gracias a los panelistas también. Buenos días, muchas gracias, y a los que nos acompañan hoy en esta mañana. Para el gobierno de Perú es muy importante apostar por la educación, pero por una educación de calidad. Sabemos que la pandemia que empezó en marzo del 2020 obligó a que se cerraran los colegios. El Perú estaba en una transición de modernización de su educación, porque las brechas de la pobreza también afectó este sector. Tan es así de que miles de estudiantes desde sus casas no podían hacer el estudio remoto. El programa que lanzó el gobierno en ese momento se llamaba Quédate en casa, pero habían hogares que no tenían ni siquiera un televisor o una radio, o más que eso, no tenían la conectividad eléctrica donde conectar esa radio para que su niño pueda escuchar las clases que desde un lugar el maestro estaba haciendo llegar a sus hogares. Inclusive si es que tuviesen la corriente eléctrica, tenían un solo teléfono y en casa habían 3, 4 niños. Entonces no había forma de que nuestros niños pudieran tener esa llegada a esa clase remota desde el lugar que el maestro les estaba indicando. Por eso es que en el 2021, de agosto a diciembre, afianzamos un poco el trabajo desde casa. Empezamos a acelerar aquella compra de tablets que en el gobierno anterior se había diseñado. Y en marzo de este año, el presidente Pedro Castillo dispuso que todos volviéramos a clases presenciales, dada la brecha amplia de que todavía no se puede cubrir el tema tecnológico de conectividad para que nuestros niños estén estudiando a distancia. Tan es así que el 14 de marzo de este año empezó un primer tramo para que puedan asistir a sus clases de manera presencial. Y el 21 de marzo fue el segundo tramo, 28 de marzo al 100%. Es así que más de toda la primaria y secundaria ya estamos dando clases presenciales. El presidente Pedro Castillo ha dispuesto la compra de 1 millón de tablets, las mismas que se están distribuyendo, pero dada esta situación que no tenemos internet en las zonas de selva o en las zonas rurales, lo que se ha hecho es de que en estas tablets se estén cargando los programas conforme el grado escolar. Tan es así de que el niño o niña que tenga su tablet podrá con confianza bajar los programas y poder entender su clase y poder responder de manera que corresponda. Pero también nosotros estamos convencidos de que no solo es el tema pedagógico en el que hay que atender, sino también es la nutrición de nuestros niños. Es por ello de que tenemos el programa Jaliwarma, que significa niño fuerte, a través del cual llevamos la alimentación nutricional en el que está comprendida la calidad de calorías y nutrientes que nuestros niños deban de tener en la zona de la selva, en la zona rural. Por ello que estamos alcanzando a casi a 4 millones de niñas y niños con esta alimentación nutricional. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. And you directed our attention, I think, to a number of themes we might like to pick up, but I thought that was absolutely fascinating point. And all the time I've been thinking and writing about education technology, a lot of us are thinking about that or invested in its ideas. But the point you make about accessibility and the danger of that exacerbating gaps in societies between the rural or outlying areas and places of, if you like, kind of, you're not even urban, but places where you can get access to your tablet and places where you can't, and how to address that. It's a really interesting point. Minister Moni from Bangladesh, one thing we do know, sadly, is that education has not been prioritised very widely in government budgets worldwide, and in fact 2/3 of lower income countries, according to the World Economic Forum's research, have cut their public education budgets. You are pushing in the other direction. You're part of a big program, Education 4.0, and an accelerator with a commitment to accelerate education reform and delivery in Bangladesh. What are the kind of lessons from the pandemic that have led you to this rather more forward position on the subject?
Thank you. Well, while the pandemic was a huge challenge, but it also gave us an opportunity and to reimagine what education can look like and what we need to build further to create an education system that would provide quality learning opportunities for all and not just few children. And we also learned that it is possible to learn in multiple spaces beyond the walls of the schools, and it could be enabled through technologies and such technology solutions could be useful in a blended education system even beyond the pandemic. We also learned that these systems could be developed so that we can adapt in case of any future pandemic-like situations. So we're now prioritizing in our education, in our primary, secondary education, and also for tertiary education. We are developing a blended education ecosystem through the National Blended Education Master Plan, and within that there are 5 elements, main 5 elements: educational content and resources, teaching learning activities, assessments, teacher professional development, and the infrastructure, education infrastructure. And these last 2, teacher professional development and infrastructure, these are foundational elements. And also we're considering all the modalities, low-tech, high-tech, and also no-tech, so that everyone is included, no one is left behind. Especially in teacher and professional development, there has to be a huge change in the mindset, and because previously the teachers were the only sources of knowledge, and now with technology and everything, teachers have to think about learners as well. I mean, they themselves will become learners as well as facilitators and guides. So as we are calling it, that from being a sage on stage to being a guide on the side. So that's what we want our teachers to be.
I'd love to think I was the sage on the stage, but I think that would be a bit immodest given the expertise on the panel in the room. JD Larocque, low-tech, high-tech, no-tech, very nicely put there, the range of blended learning and potential ways to approach this, and what the mix might look like also in post-pandemic with the budget as stretched as they are. But what kind of investments would you like to see support new ways of learning, and where do you think the private sector fits in?
Thank you, Anne. I think the private sector has an enormously important role to play. And at the nonprofit organization that I lead, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, we've really seen this corporate involvement come into force during the pandemic. A little bit about us. We're a global nonprofit that supports high-quality entrepreneurship education in 25 states in the U.S. and 20 countries around the world. In essence, we work to help young people in secondary and tertiary education learn how to launch businesses. And after our program, many do start and sustain businesses. And that's enormously important, of course, for economic development. Part of our model, our formal model, is not just the curriculum, it's also very much supplemented by the involvement of corporate and community volunteers, many of whom come from industry. And during the pandemic, we utilized technology and low-tech means to connect corporate employees who served as mentors and guides and supporters of our students in their journey to becoming young business owners in force. I'll give you a few examples. So Mary Kay, the cosmetics company, worked with several of our global partners, Feroiga, an NGO we work with in Ireland, Halogen, an NGO we work with in Singapore, and Fundación A, an NGO we work with in Mexico. And they deployed their employees to work with young learners on communication skills, presentation skills, financial literacy skills, refining their emerging business plans. And what is so interesting to view about corporate employees and how they interact with learners is because they are professionals coming from the outside, and they are different from what the learners often experience. They generate enthusiasm from the students, and they have a credibility that sometimes their teachers don't always have, or in addition to the credibility their teachers also have. So that's just one example of a company that we worked with to deploy support for learners worldwide as we attempted to work with students around the globe to become young entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your introductory thoughts. I might just please feel free to debate each other. We'll do this for about 10 minutes, I think, and then get some questions. Vice President Duarte, you touched at the end on other programs that you are using that are obviously connected to your mission on education. You're responsible for social inclusion, so your remit is broader than just schools and education. And you talked about nutrition, and you reminded me that we sometimes have a tendency to put things into boxes, and we think about nutrition or social development or the way that we plan cities and urban areas, and then we think about education separately. In a country like Peru, with all its magnificent complexity, it sounds like you're trying to bring other things into the case for education. Tell us a bit about that.
Sí, claro. Como digo, para el presidente Pedro Castillo y para nosotros, la educación y la salud es prioridad para desarrollar nuestros pueblos. Es por eso de que en el gobierno del presidente Pedro Castillo la currícula básica de la educación la hemos mejorado y la estamos actualizando, toda vez de que las clases la estamos dando no solamente en el idioma castellano, que es nuestro lenguaje madre, sino que nosotros somos una región pluricultural. Tal es así de que las clases que estamos llevando, tanto en la sierra como en la selva, las estamos dando en español, pero también en sus propios idiomas. Inclusive la currícula, conforme nuestros niños vayan aprendiendo en su idioma natural, que puede ser el conibo, el shipibo, el bora, el quechua, en acompañamiento con el castellano, estamos replanteando la currícula que en cuanto nuestros niños ya puedan haber comprendido bien su idioma nativo, el castellano, implementar el inglés, porque sabemos que el inglés es el idioma casi universal y queremos que nuestros niños sean chicos no solamente para que puedan emprender una profesión en el país, sino que salgan chicos al mundo. Hay que aprender de los ejemplos de Japón, de Canadá, de Estados Unidos, que ellos han invertido bastante en educación y es lo que queremos hacer en el Perú. Es por eso que en el gobierno del presidente Pedro Castillo hemos incrementado a un 8% más, a diferencia de otros gobiernos anteriores, para poder invertir en la educación. Hay un programa juntos desde el Ministerio de Desarrollo e Inclusión Social, en el que en la zona de la selva y de la zona de la sierra estamos implementando un incremento económico, algo así como un plus, un bono, a fin de que podamos hacer de que nuestros niños de estos lugares que por el centralismo que Lima maneja, ha habido mucha deserción escolar. Este bono está haciendo de que los alumnos, los chicos vuelvan a los colegios y los que destaquen en sus clases puedan tener un bono adicional y terminen la secundaria, porque normalmente en esos lugares no terminan casi la secundaria, sobre todo en el grupo de las mujeres. Estamos queriendo impulsar de que nuestras niñas, nuestros niños terminen la secundaria o el bachillerato que está en otros países, pero también queremos terminar la secundaria, empatar con el programa que tenemos, Beca 18, que nuestros chicos puedan llegar a las universidades, pero a veces las capacidades de todos no están seguramente para un estudio profesional universitario, pero pueden hacer estudios de mando medio, técnicos. También queremos impulsar en ese sector para que con la empresa privada podamos enganchar espacios laborales y de esta manera no tengamos a nuestros niños terminando secundaria sin saber qué hacer, sino salir seguramente a un espacio laboral o continuar sus estudios superiores, siendo esta universitaria o tecnológica, de tal manera que la educación en nuestro país es muy, muy importante y creo que para la región y para el mundo, que si no tenemos a nuestros chicos bien preparados, listos para poder enfrentar el mundo, estaríamos en desventaja. Nosotros queremos poner a nuestros chicos en primer nivel y en estos 5 años en que el presidente Pedro Castillo va a toma las riendas del Perú, vamos a apostar por la educación y por la salud, que son los 2 pilares más importantes para nosotros como gobierno.
Thank you very much indeed. JD, let me bring you in on that. I wondered when the Vice President was talking about the impact of different forms of learning and trying to bring us to the next level, but also to stop pupils dropping out of school. I'm just curious, is there any evidence that says that more experiential, blended learning has better outcomes there, particularly in societies where there can be a pull either to go into the workforce early or simply that going to school is hard and the support is not fully there? Do we know anything about that? Because that's obviously rather important, isn't it, if we want all of these countries to be able to keep K through 12 going and get to the next level?
Yes, in fact, there's a growing body of evidence that experiential learning and project-based learning is very beneficial in preventing students from leaving school for a very obvious reason. Take what we do at the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship. We are encouraging young people to start businesses, and we start that process by asking the students, what is important to you? What is compelling to you? What has meaning to you? What are you passionate about? And unlike some classroom learning, which may or may not be relevant to the student, experiential learning, project-based learning, entrepreneurship education taps into the student's passion from the start. Therefore, it gives them a reason to stay and pursue. Now, of course, with entrepreneurship education, the whole purpose of which is to promote a student's ability to actually launch a business. This helps in the communities that we work in the US and around the world, because we are providing a means for students to support themselves and their families, which is often a huge reason why students stop out and drop out of school. Going back to our earlier discussion about the role of the private sector, key to this is not only providing the type of curriculum and education that would provide a reason for a student to stay in school, but we often need more. And the Vice President's point about holistic approaches is very well taken. At NIFTY, we run a lot of summer camp programs for entrepreneurship education, as well as in-school-based programs. It is so critical that we have corporate support to provide stipends for those learners to attend the summer programs. Why? Because most of the students we work with are low income. Most of the students have to work. Most of the students would not attend our program even if they were interested, if we didn't also provide them the monetary incentive to do it. And so some of our corporate supporters like Zora and PayPal, EY, who are funding our summer programs, are doing something very important, and by the way, filling a gap that public governments are not filling.
Let's turn then in the last minutes before Q&A to the public-private mix. Minister Moni, I don't know how this is received politically in your country, but there are often tensions about what the right presence and role of the private sector is in education. And I think probably particularly as you go down the age range and in K through 12, there are mixed views and there are mixed political views about what is acceptable. For you, what is the role of the private sector? And, we're among friends here. Don't worry, we're only live streamed. Are there problems around that? Are there disagreements?
No, I would say in Bangladesh we have a unique model whereby our primary education is all public. But, and there are some private entities that provide kindergarten education, but secondary education is mostly private. But these are private schools, but the infrastructure is built mostly by the government. All the books for all primary, secondary education, these are all free books given by the government. Teachers training, teachers recruitment, everything is done by the government. So it's a very interesting public-private mix, and it's giving us results. And we are promoting actually private-public mix, and that is why we are participating in this accelerator, the education accelerator, the Bridging the Gap or Closing the Education Gap accelerator of World Education Forum. We have this blended education accelerator that we have launched to prepare our learners, the young talent, the new generation of talent for future of work. And we are cooperating with and working together with World Economic Forum. So locally, we are launching this accelerator, and globally we're cooperating with WEF. And because in education, we have to prepare our next generation for the future of work, for the changes that are coming in. And there are huge changes, and we have to prepare them for that. And no government alone can do it. So there has to be a public-private mix and also global collaboration. So that is why Bangladesh is participating in this this Closing the Education Gap accelerator, and we're launching it.
We will be watching your progress closely. Vice President, same sort of question to you. You touched on the role of the private sector in what you're doing. To what extent is that very widely accepted? And if there are questions about the right balance between public and private, what are they like in Peru, and what do they most affect?
Sí, el trabajo entre el Estado y el sector privado es bastante importante. El ministro de Educación ha estado en este momento reuniéndose con diversos sectores privados, quienes quieren apostar por la educación en el Perú. Tan es así que hace poco hemos estado en la zona de Pucallpa, hemos estado en la zona de Cerro de Pasco, en la zona de Apurímac, y el sector privado lo que indica es que deben de poner mayor interés en el aporte, no solamente seguramente en apoyar el acompañamiento con dar mayor capacitación a los maestros o dar mayor capacitación a nuestros niños, sino estar buscando, como dije anteriormente, estos espacios laborales desde donde podamos capacitar a nuestros niños a fin de que no estén un tanto sueltos. En el Perú tenemos bastante inseguridad ciudadana, en donde nuestros jóvenes están en las calles, en estas actividades no lícitas. Entonces, un poco para poder disminuir esto que nuestros niños están sueltos, hay que empezar a darles una ocupación. Y en esto la empresa privada está bastante bien comprometida. Nos hemos reunido con diferentes empresarios. Ellos están aptos para querer trabajar de la mano con el Estado peruano, pero sí hay que esto concretar en convenios reales, en convenios que se cumplan, porque también cuando vamos a las comunidades al interior del Perú, hay un poco de desconcierto en la sociedad cuando dicen que todo se queda en papeles, en documentos y no se ejecuta, no se efectiviza. Entonces nos estamos sentando con la empresa privada para que realmente se cumplan los compromisos y no solamente queden en ese ofrecimiento, sino que realmente se cumplan y además se vea en el terreno cuál es el resultado de este apoyo con la empresa privada. Pero venimos conversando, no ha sido muy fácil de que la empresa privada quiera apostar por la educación en el país, pero desde el gobierno del presidente Pedro Castillo estamos en reuniones constantes para que esto realmente sea efectivo y la empresa privada no nos mire de reojito, sino más bien nos mire con el corazón abierto y podamos trabajar juntos en esto que es tan importante, la educación en el país.
Thank you very much. That seems an ideal segue to go to the audience. There's a microphone around, and just feel free to tell us who you are, because that always helps us put your question in context. Who'd like to take the lady in the front? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to see this panel. My name's Roya Bagai. I'm from Australia, but we have a global organisation that's all around activating a sense of human responsibility in children and young people and teenagers. And one of the programs that we have is Videos for Change, which enables young people to get involved in their communities and to use project-based learning to talk about the issues that they care about. So what you said really spoke to me. But I'd like to ask all of the panelists, you've spoken about how there's this massive disruption that's happened in education. How do you think curriculums need to adapt to a new world where young people are having to learn new skills that are not necessarily in the current curriculum and the challenges that educators face to teach basic skills, but what are the new skills or other skills that the current curriculum is not teaching? Have you adapted curricula to adapt to the new environment that young people face? Thank you.
Question, JD, take
Yes.
us away.
I think we are in the midst of a revolution in education where we are realizing that the idea is to focus away from traditional content. I mean, content will always have a role, don't get me wrong, but more towards broad-based skills. At the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, we have a philosophy that says you teach entrepreneurship by teaching what we call the 8 domains of the entrepreneurial mindset. And they are things like communication, collaboration, problem solving, future orientation, ability to manage risk. Now, these are not facts and figures. These are concepts. These are frameworks of the mind. And when you do that, you engage learners. By the way, I mean, the economic payoff to shifting education models to more of a skills orientation can't be denied. One of the things that's so compelling about WEF's report, Catalyzing Education 4.0, is this finding that if we just focused on one of the skills I named, collaborative problem solving, that we would increase world GDP by $2.4 trillion. So I think that education systems around the world are seeing the benefits of this kind of shift in orientation. And to your question, and I very much appreciate what you shared about your organization, at NIFTY, by teaching those skills, what we are seeing is students also latching on to other ways in which the world is changing and the world of work is changing. The businesses that our learners create fall into 3 categories: app-based businesses, traditional projects and services, and social entrepreneurship ventures. Students have a great sense of caring about the world, and again, that is another thing that I think needs to be reflected more in contemporary education.
In my role as the small sage on the stage, I'm going to ask the panel to be reasonably brief in these, if a question goes to everybody, just so we can get a couple of other questions in. You can come and scold me afterwards.
Just respond?
Yes, of course. Please come in. I was just getting my teacher bit out of the way.
We were in the midst of formulating our new curriculum, and then this pandemic happened, and our new curriculum is now being tested, and it will be rolled out from next year. And we have changed the whole focus. It's more experiential learning, learning by doing, learning to learn, because that's what you need to do now. It's such a fast changing world now, and what you learn today may not be relevant 5 years down the line. So they have to learn how to learn, and there has to be joy in learning. So that's why we're focusing more on doing things and learning rather than learning by rote. So that's the whole change, the focus. And what we are seeing while it's being tried out is a huge difference from before. And children are more enthusiastic, they're learning, and teachers are also more enthusiastic now. So I think we are actually heading absolutely in the right direction. Thank you.
Ms. Boluarte, what are you putting into your curriculum or planning to put into curriculum that wasn't there before in Peru?
Mire, gracias por la pregunta. Estamos agregando a la currícula la enseñanza que en cada región deben de tener. El Perú tiene costa, sierra y selva, y cada una de estas regiones tiene su propia idiosincrasia, tiene su propia cultura. La currícula anteriormente era plana. Lo mismo se enseñaba en la costa, lo mismo en la sierra y lo mismo en la selva. En esta oportunidad estamos actualizando la currícula para que en esos aprendizajes y en la enseñanza vaya la educación conforme su región, conforme su idiosincrasia, de tal manera que nuestros niños no solamente van a conocer a ciencia cierta en lo que es comprensión lectora, su historia, su cultura, sino también lo que a nivel nacional el Perú es como lo que es. Entonces nuestros niños al término de primaria y secundaria tendrán el conocimiento in situ de su región, donde están ellos conviviendo, viviendo, pero también lo que en general es el Perú. Eso es lo que estamos haciendo, estamos afianzando en que nuestros niños, terminando el grado que corresponda, efectivamente entiendan lo que leen, comprendan lo que el profesor le está diciendo, porque a veces, como decimos en el Perú, pasamos por agua tibia, y ese no es el tema. Acá es que tiene el niño que saber si lo que está leyendo, el niño tiene que haber entendido lo que está leyendo y poder transmitir lo que ha comprendido, lo que ha aprendido.
Thank you. Let's get a couple of questions. Yeah, I'll take the lady in the red dress. And sorry, did you want to go first? Sorry, we'll go the other way around. Blue jacket followed by red dress. We are going to have to pick up the pace to get some questions in 10 minutes. So quick questions and haiku-like answers from my extremely brilliant panel.
Thank you, and thank you for the excellent chairing and the wonderful panel here. I'm Lisbeth Steer with the Global Education Commission. I would like to take it back to the title of this session, which is the economic case for education.
Very good thought.
And I feel there's a cognitive dissonance here. You've mentioned all the wonderful numbers earlier in the session. Rates of return, how good it is for the economy, for society, health, climate. At the same time, budgets are being cut. Philanthropists are disengaging, donors are cutting budgets. Across the board, education is being deprioritized. It's not top on the agenda at the World Economic Forum, even though it's the most important thing companies could do is invest in the future labor force. I'd love to know why. Why is this?
Hold your thoughts. We'll take the other question, and I'm going to ask the panel just to take the question that's more relevant to. Sorry, I'm sure you've got thoughts on everything, but we'll just need to prioritise. So sorry, do go ahead. Oops, here we go. Sprinting the microphone to you.
Thank you. Actually, my question relates to her. I am Faraja Nyalandu, a young global leader from Tanzania. I work in EdTech. And I also serve as a chairperson of the Tanzania Education Network. And my question was around investment. How much are we looking at in terms of this being a global platform, in terms of negotiating, but also pushing for improved budget allocation and our GDP allocation towards the education sector? I think it's imperative that we also look at the level of investment that we're doing at the national level, but also at the global level. The second point that I really wanted to have your insights on was around teachers' professional development. We know that even though the teachers are becoming very diverse in terms of moving from being a teacher to a facilitator, but how much are we also looking at teachers' professional development in the curriculum reforms, and how willing are we in investing in teachers, but also supporting them with their professional development?
They're interrelated questions. Feel free to touch on them. I think this will probably be our final round. So actually, why don't we start with JD? Elizabeth Sears' challenge is one that resonates. If it's so important, why aren't you doing it? You know, and this goes across governments. I wasn't aware that philanthropy was dropping off as much as you suggest. Do you see the picture the same way? And of course, please do feel free to touch on the professional development.
Yes and no. So in the U.S., the government has put, considerable supplemental funds toward education due to the pandemic. At the same time, what this revealed was that those funds have always been needed because of the yawning gaps in inequality in education among students in the United States. I would counter on the private sector side, at least in the context in which I work. I am seeing very many countries, Zora, SAP, Citi, Santander, really stepping up in ways that corporations have not always stepped up to support what we do. Can it always be more and greater and more sustained? Of course it can. But I think your point is extremely well taken about the need to conceive of a new baseline for education funding from public governments from here on out.
Well, in
Yes, please.
in Bangladesh, we are actually increasing our investments, both public and private, in education, because for us to go from digital Bangladesh to an innovative Bangladesh in 2041, it has to be done. This has to be the most prioritized sector, and that the government realizes, that our private sector has now started to realize, because they want their workforce, and they want their workforce to be skilled, otherwise they will not survive. So I think that realization is there, and because of and you need leadership under the Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's leadership. Bangladesh is active also globally in education, so we are prioritizing it, and so investment is not a problem for us. Teachers' professional development. I talked about 5 elements in our blended education framework, and teachers' professional development is the key. Whatever changes we are contemplating, it cannot be implemented without the teachers. They're at the center. So their professional development, their proper training, that is a priority. And their social and financial security, that is a key. So we are also focusing on that.
What proportion of GDP is spent on education?
Oh, that's up to now only about 3%, but we are increasing it, trying to increase it. You see, when you're at a stage of development where we are now, it is sometimes very difficult because you need massive investment in other infrastructures, but we are also at a stage where maybe education will become our next mega project. So that is where we're looking forward to.
A mega project, what a great idea. Sorry, I did need to just get a thought from the Vice President. Ms. Bolati, what proportion of GDP in Peru is spent on education, and do you see that challenge that there is too little commitments by governments who often find the results too far down the line for their immediate political advantage?
Sí, Para nosotros la educación es lo más importante, por eso de que el presidente Pedro Castillo ha planteado que del PBI el 6% se va a asignar a educación. Es una asignación bastante bien importante. Y en cuanto a la pregunta que hiciera Elizabeth, gracias. Nosotros, desde gobiernos anteriores inclusive, se ha puesto bastante interés en la capacitación y preparación del docente. Tan es así que se ha implementado que los docentes, para que puedan ganar un poco más, puedan ser magíster, tener el grado de magíster. Y es por eso de que los maestros en el Perú, casi la gran mayoría ya tiene ese grado, no solamente se han quedado con el título profesional o el bachillerato, sino son magísters en educación. Y por ello es que ahora tienen un ingreso económico mejorado. Pero también nosotros tenemos los centros de altos estudios, y esto está más en la zona de la sierra y la selva, donde los niños que tienen mejor y mayor rendimiento son captados y están en estos centros de altos estudios, donde les damos no solamente la educación, la alimentación, sino también la residencia estudiantil. Ahí viven nuestros chicos con sus profesores y ellos tienen un programa casi especial por lo mismo que son un centro de altos estudios. Además, nosotros con la empresa privada hemos pactado en aquellos lugares bastante bien distantes nos apoyen con la conectividad del Internet. Y ahí están entrando ellos a apoyarnos. Tenemos construcciones de obras por impuesto. Ahí también participan las empresas. Gracias.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, there we must start to wrap up our session. I mean, my takeaways, I'd be very interested to hear from anyone afterwards, or indeed you on social media. The economic case for education was, I think, already very strong, but coming out of the pandemic and against the global backdrop that we have, which is very worrying, but also I think at a time of great innovation and technological enabling, if we want to have more equitable economic recovery, we are going to need to keep our focus on this and keep advocacy at its most effective in terms of budgets. And I think in your various ways, from different perspectives and different parts of the world, you've reflected on your own commitments. And in each case, I'm fascinated, but you're thinking a lot about changes. We're not just coming here to say, please give us more money, because it's what we said a few years ago. We're saying it in a very different context, and I think with opportunity as well as concerns front of mind. So thank you very much, and thank you, audience, for coming and your questions. If you haven't got the report, there really is a lot of fascinating stuff in it. Catalysing Education 4.0. It's at the back of the room. Thanks to you all. Thanks to our interpreter. Very much enjoyed the session. Enjoy your day.